Hello and welcome to Women's World, the only TV show where women's issues are put first every time. If it's in the news and it matters to you, then we're bound to be talking about it here. My name is Yvonne Ridley.
And my name is Nabila Zahir. In this latest edition of Women's World, we have an exclusive message just for you from one of the most famous daughters of the Arab Revolution.
And that's not all. We put the focus on the role played by Arab women across the Arab world and ask why they were more visible in some uprisings but not in others.
Before we launch ourselves into today's subject, here's a report from Nina Arif, who talks to two well-known women in the UK to get their take.
The world is changing, and nowhere has this been more apparent than in the countries which paid host to the Arab Spring. But what will the changes we've witnessed mean for the women in these countries? I spoke to Shami Chakrabarti and Dr. Nazreen Nawaz to find out. Shami Chakrabarti, what role are women playing in the Arab Spring?
Women have a very important part to play. Certainly in Egypt, where Liberty has a sister organisation, the Egyptian Initiative for Personal Rights, women are involved in that organisation and have been for some time.
I think women have had a huge role and have made huge sacrifices in the Arab Spring. They've made huge contributions, and I think they've got an integral part to play in terms of shaping the future of those lands. Whether we're talking about individuals such as Asma Mahfouz in Egypt, the young girl who people say sparked the revolution on the 25th of January, or women such as Tawakkul Karman in Yemen.
Are you disappointed by the lack of female representation in Egypt, Tunisia and Libya?
I'm always optimistic, because you can't be a human rights campaigner without being optimistic, but I just urge the Democrats in those countries to realise that their work, their fantastic work so far, will not be sustainable. It will not stand the test of time. It will not be the moment that it should be if they don't empower more women.
Look, I think this is a historical time for change, a historical momentous opportunity for change. And because of that, I think we need to have an honest debate about the different models of governance which are out there, and really all options should be on the table. I think it would be disastrous for foreign governments with a particular political agenda to hijack this debate.
Do you think there's a danger that women will be sidelined once the new governments emerge?
I think that gender equality has to be written in to the constitutions of new democracies. I think it's absolutely essential.
The worst possible scenario would be for the sacrifices of women who have lost their lives, who have lost the lives of their children and their families, to be betrayed. And it'll be betrayed by actually calling for a system where nothing changes.
And they will not be democracies, and they will not be built upon the rock of the rule of law and fundamental rights and freedoms if equality for men and women, equal treatment under the law, equal rights to participate in elections, in the democratic process, if that is not written into the new constitutions of these societies, I think there will be trouble later on.
Thank you, Nina. Well, today we're joined by journalist and political activist Shahrukh Khudar, who went to her native Syria to find out exactly what is happening in her troubled country.
And sitting next to Shahrukh is the co-author of a book, The People Demand, which takes a look at the history of the Arab revolutions. Welcome to John Rees. It's the end of the year. It's been a momentous year. What sort of role have Arab women played in this Islamic awakening?
Well, I think a very significant one, especially in Egypt, but throughout the Arab revolutions. They were at the forefront of the revolution, of organising it. They were part of the kind of internal cadre of the organisation. We often hear that the Arab revolutions were spontaneous events, and in the sense that millions of people who not previously been involved in politics joined in, that was true. But it was also true that there were serious levels of organisation which preceded the revolution, in the Egyptian case really for 10 years of organising, and women were at the heart of that, as well as being among the most prominent participants in the fighting and the organising that went on during the revolution as well. But that was true of many oppressed groups. It's true in Egypt of Coptic Christians, who are also an oppressed group. It's true of the poor generally, who of course have been excluded from political life life. So every revolution is a kind of festival of the oppressed, so you would expect women and other oppressed groups to be playing a prominent role.
I mean, each revolution has been different, but women have been much more visible in Bahrain, in Yemen, than, say, in Syria. We haven't seen very many women on the streets in Syria. Why is that?
Well, I think in both the Syrian case and the Libyan case, when the revolution becomes militarised, when it takes the form of a civil war or approaching a civil war, that excludes very large sections of the population, including many women who would otherwise play a role. It's not the ideal development. I think actually in time, if the fighting goes on, you will find that women also then begin to play a role. This has happened historically. If we think about the Spanish Revolution, which did also militarise into a civil war, eventually the women's militias and organisers also came to the fore, even under those conditions. But I think initially it makes it more difficult.
Sharik, you've just returned from Syria. What sort of dangers do women face in such a scenario?
I came back in September, and basically what I got the sense over there was that there was a complete sectarian divide, whereas before it was completely normal to go out and wear what you want, and no one would say anything. You could go out at 3 a.m. and no one would really talk to you. This time it was, you have to stay at home, you can't wear this because people will look at you, you can't get into certain taxis because it might be dangerous, so it was completely restrictive.
Now, before you went out to Syria, you were very much supporting what was being portrayed as a popular uprising in the Western media.
Yeah.
What happened when you got there?
Well, when I got there, I realised that the media had completely fabricated a lot of the events that were happening. For example, they would say 1 million people would be protesting in Hama. The Syrian media would go to Hama and you'd see it would be about 100,000 people, maybe a couple of hundred people, and it was completely hyperbolic what the Western media was doing. So it was just little things like that, but then other things, I mean, so many stories that you could tell about what they had fabricated and what they omitted from their reports. So that completely changed my mind as well, and stories as well from my own relatives and friends as well who were there.
So are you saying that the Western media are putting up a spin about what is happening in Syria?
Completely, yeah.
Why?
Yeah, 100%. It seems to fit their agenda. I mean, if Syria falls, if the Syrian government falls, then it gives